This is what it takes to DP an automotive YouTube TV series. So this job came about from my good friend Alex, a Colorado-based director. We had met a few years ago on a music video, starting our working relationship that has blossomed into a great friendship. Last year, he brought me this idea to do a YouTube TV series called Driver's ID. Essentially, it's documentary meets commercial, and it's about people and their car builds. I'm a huge car guy myself, so I instantly hopped on board. This shoot involved little pre-production, as we had very limited time to work beforehand. I came up with a lighting plan based off of some internet photos of the location, and worked with Village City Rentals to provide all the gear we needed. After location scouting on the internet, I realized that this is a pretty large shop we're shooting in, and so there's going to be a variety of lights I need. The lighting kit included a 1200D, 600C, Amarin 200C, 2 Pavo tubes, 4 Aperture MCs, a 150W, and a 60W. We used a variety of modifiers and diffusions. That includes a 8x8 silk, 8x8 neg, spotlight, a 150 light dome 2, and a Fresnel. For the camera and lenses, we used the Red V Raptor, a Red Gemini, DZO Vespid primes, and the Laowa 24mm probe lens. Day one was a general B-roll day. In pre-production, I had set up a whole shot list and had a general idea of what I wanted. But on set that day, I arrived and they wanted me to be more of a fly on the wall, shoot what you need, but don't get in our way. And that was completely fine. I realized that I'm working in a working shop. They're not going to shut the entire shop down so that I can get the shot I want. And that kind of just changed my plan day of. So the main focus of the shoot was actually on the front suspension of the Tacoma. It was getting long travel installed, and so this truck isn't moving. There's a few parts being taken on and off, but there's not a lot of action. So the first struggle was, how do I make this, work being done on the truck look interesting with lighting and composition? So this is when I went back to my pre-production shot list and still pulled a few shots that I could still do. So one of those being, I took a ladder and I just jumped up on the ladder. It's a super high angle looking down on the entire shop. I think I was shooting on either the 16 or the 25mm on the Raptor, and it just shows the whole depth of the shop, still sees the truck, and it's just a unique angle that you really don't see very often. To spice up these shots a lot, I used more of these wider angle lenses rather than your traditional lenses. So I was using the 16mm and the probe quite a bit for this shoot. One of my favorite shots actually was on the 16mm. I was just, painting the camera back and forth with the headlights on the truck, just trying to get these fast transitional pieces for the edit in the future. And I had the headlights on and the light just hit the lens just right to where I have this very unique flare that I've actually never seen before. And it ended up being one of my favorite shots of the entire shoot. Another lens we brought on this shoot was actually the Laowa 24mm probe. This was an RF mount, so it just directly to the Raptor, which is super cool. With suspension components, there's a lot of things going on, and you kind of have to shoot through, a control arm to get to another component. So it actually allowed me to push through a lot of the control arms and to show the strut, or I was able to get super close to the wheel and just show a lot of the textures. So that was a very unique lens to be able to use to get really close in this really tight space. We're shooting in a wheel well, and there's really not much room in the wheel well. So being able to use this probe lens allowed us to get to a lot of places you normally can't. One thing about the probe lens is the widest aperture is a T14, so the image is just extremely dark. So I ended up having the 600C raking across the suspension components, and then the Raptor was set to 3200 ISO. This gave us just enough light to shoot this lens, so I recommend if you do rent this lens, just have enough output to actually be able to use it. I want to point out how important it is to do a location scout on any shoot. Like I said, I had done an internet location scout before, which gave me a rough idea of what I need. But when it comes to the actual shoot, a day before the shoot, we went out to the location, talking with the owners, and also just figuring out what does the space genuinely look like? Where is the light coming from naturally? And that was actually a cool thing is we went at sunset and they have this window that the sun was just coming in so naturally, and it perfectly hit the truck we were filming. And so I just had that as a mental note, and on the day that I came in for all the B-roll, and I was able to actually shoot the truck in that perfect amount of light. And I wouldn't have known that going in without that pre-production and the location scout. Day 2, we shot our master interview. We took a good amount of time setting up and figuring out our lighting plan for this shoot.
Yeah, I just looked at 1200. I just looked I feel like this is pretty good. The only thing I'd say is on this left-hand corner,
in pre-production, I had already made a lighting diagram, but as I got onto the location, I realized that wasn't going to work. I'm a big fan of lighting spaces, not faces, but in this one, we kind of did both. We had to first, just set our composition and where we wanted our talent to sit in correlation to just the shop. and then we kind of brought in lighting from there. Our key light was a 600C with a 150 light dome 2, pushing through an 8x silk. From there, we were really trying to figure out what kind of things in the shop can we highlight, and also where can we motivate this light from, using the window light that we have available. So we took this 300D with the spotlight mount and we shined it up at this 4Runner in the background, and that really added some texture and some light, especially because it's red, it kind of added a little pop. We also had a 150 watt light, and that was just shining, giving some ambience in the back, the dark background. We wanted to bring that up a little bit, so it's not completely falling in the darkness. And then on this tire or alignment machine, we had this pavo tube, and that was just kind of acting as a practical, kind of looked natural in the space. And then behind his Tacoma, we actually placed the 1200D on a very, I think it was like 0.2%. And that was just, again, adding ambience, but it was also lighting up this gray 4th gen Tacoma, and then also having some streaks of light that kind of looked like they were motivated from the window.
I feel like what we have here, so that 150 cutting is bringing in this light. That 300, that was a great idea on the 4Runner. I love that. And then this little tube over here is actually acting real naturally, I feel like. And then that 1200.
The last few things we did with this scene was I added an MC under his Tacoma, lighting up the axle and the wheel wells, and then a pavo tube in his bed, kind of adding a little bit of light under the tent. And then we were fighting the sun a lot on this shoot, and so we ended up putting a neg behind camera, blocking a window. And that ended up being really helpful, but this light that we were chasing all night, it just kept creeping into our shot, and we ended up using jackets on windows and just doing whatever we can. And unfortunately, we did lose a lot of contrast. So I ended up taking that 600C that we used as the key and just kind of wrapping it a little bit less so that we add a little more contrast on his face. I am really grateful that we had all these lights. If we just had, one key and maybe sort of a light using for the hair, it would have been great. But I think the main thing with this shoot was we have this whole shop available to us. And so I want to utilize the entire location to the best of our ability. And so having all those lights to add little pings of light and texture in the background and really layering this and adding depth was a major key in making this look better. It's a lot less generic than rather having a super tight and just getting rid of the background, having all that fall off and not having all that depth. I think, showing where we are is a big importance in this story we're trying to tell of this guy's truck. This project couldn't have happened without the help from Village City Rentals. Projects don't always have the resources to bring a ton of gear on, so we were very grateful that VCR got on board and had everything we needed to make this come to life. Based out of Alton, Illinois, right outside of St. Louis, we have a variety of photo and cinema cameras, lenses, lighting, and much more for whatever your production calls for. We act as a local rental house and a national online rental service. All gear is available for fast shipping to the lower 48. For your next project, head to villageCityRentals.com. I've worked with these guys at Village City Rental for years now on a ton of projects, music video, commercial, narrative. They are industry DPs, industry directors, and they know the ins and outs of the cinema world. So you know that when you're renting from these guys, you're not dealing with a bunch of bozos. This was part one for this project. For more behind the scenes, production breakdowns, and just an insight into what it's like becoming a DP in this new age of filmmaking, like and subscribe. We'll see you next time. Raked across the suspension. Oh my gosh!